Okay, we move now to Act 2. Act 1 is just a setup. The introduction, the prologue was just a setup for the setup. We had to have our DNA in place in order to get things moving. We had to have the hero get an idea, an understanding, a concept of his born identity being lost and his need to restore it, need to bring into balance. We had to have the call to adventure. So Act 1 is just sort of a prologue to a prologue, or I should say a prologue to the rest of the story. And so now we're going into the rest of the story. But keep in mind that the hero, this journey that the hero is on, is now going to become an inward journey. He's going to leave the surface world to go inside of himself. That's the only way he can deal with this repressed born identity and the fear that keeps it repressed. Both of those things are within the hero. They're within us. They're not out here where we can deal with them. They're in here. So that's why fantasy is so commonly used and so powerfully used in telling stories. Because in fantasy, we can use metaphor to create these elements. The dragon becomes the fear, and the damsel in distress becomes the born identity, the thing we're trying to restore. So by externalizing these things, we can now interact with them and we can deal with them. But the thing is, the hero comes into this inward journey from the surface, and he takes the surface with him. He takes the false identity with him. The hero isn't looking to just return to the born identity. He's looking to bring balance to his life. He wants to maintain the false identity, but also bring the born identity out from repression. That's his goal. Because if he can do that, he keeps the insulation that protects him from the fear, but at the same time, he doesn't have to deal with the negative aspects of his false identity. That balance is what the hero's trying to strike. So what happens is, I call this the descent. And in the plot, we see this as the hero transitioning from a familiar world into an unfamiliar world. We see this all the time. Often they cross a literal bridge because this is symbolic of going from the external surface world into the internal subconscious or soul. And that's the journey that the hero has to take. It's a stranger in a strange land journey. But the story element of it comes in with Genesis 1:7, where it says that the waters below the firmament, God called the waters below the firmament. That's where we're going. We're going into the waters below. There's a firmament that separated the waters below from the waters above. The waters above represent that false identity that we've been living in. It's the surface world. The waters below represent our inner self. The soul, the spirit, the heart, whatever you want to call it, it's the inner self, the intangible self that the hero has to descend into. So I call this the descent. We see the descent, or an example of it, in Knights and Dragons. In plot, it looks like this. The hero, our hero, who now has made the decision that he's going to rescue the princess, but he only wants to rescue her and bring her back to her father so that he can bring balance back into his life. He doesn't want to become the knight again. He just doesn't want to be insignificant. He doesn't want to be nothing. He was meant to be something. So he's looking for balance. So his goal is to go and rescue the princess. But he enters this remote area of the realm which is populated by slaves and slave owners. He's looking for the princess there. And why is it slaves and slave owners? Because the story tells us this. The story tells us that the thing the hero is most concerned with right now isn't his fear, it is this insignificance that he's dealing with. That when the soldiers spit on him and made him water their horses, that is what he's trying to get rid of. That is where he sees his born identity being lost in. And so we represent this metaphorically by slaves and slave owners. It's the idea of insignificance. A slave has no significance. And the princess is among them, meaning the hero's repressed independence, their born identity, is living among insignificance. And so all he has to do is rescue her and take her back to the father. In The Matrix, we see the plot plays out when Neo is offered two pills, the blue and the red. The blue With the blue pill, he goes back to his old life. With the red pill, he crosses over into another world. He takes the red pill. And when he takes the red pill, he has this very surreal experience where he gets sucked into his own mouth and down this esophagus. Again, inward journey, right? He's taking the inward journey. It's very symbolic. And when he comes out the other side, he finds out that he's just a battery. He's basically being used for energy. He's inside this giant octopus-like thing with all these tentacles that are sucking energy out of all these humans who are sleeping and dreaming, and their dream is the Matrix. So he realizes that is a picture of insignificance. He's not afraid of insignificance. That is not his fear, but that's what he's trying to bring balance back into his life, is to bring significance back into his life. So Morpheus, the One, Neo, are all symbolic of his born identity. Mr. Anderson is symbolic of his false identity.